everything is either a prequel or a nostalgia fest for the thing that was great 25 years ago. But it's not moving forward. There have not been new stories, a new status quo, new events, new factions, new characters. So I think the reason these franchises are kind of stalling out is because they are not doing one of those two things.
Hello everyone, welcome back. I'm back. If you didn't see me in the other videos because I was sick, but I'm back. You know what I'm saying? But how's everyone doing? I'm here today with my boys Daniel and Hervé.
How you doing?
Hi.
And today, Monday topic will be it's an interesting one. What can save the Forever franchise? But before we even get into that, I think we should explain to you what that actually means. Daniel, please explain to our 11 or 10 subscribers.
So what we mean by Forever franchise is there's a couple of big franchises out there that have a few things in common. They are huge names in pop culture. They have been around for a long time. They keep getting new stuff, and they are kind of treading water in terms of story and where they're taking the franchise. So examples of this would be Star Wars, Star Trek, Jurassic Park, Ghostbusters, Alien, Predator, Terminator. Right? So there's quite a few of them, and they tend to be movies that were huge hits in the 70s and 80s, and they just keep going. And they all seem to be kind of stuck in at the moment where they were great or that made them famous, but they tend to not want to move forward at all. And given how much oxygen they take up in popular culture and in the movie release schedule, I thought it would be interesting to talk about, do they have to be this way? Can they be saved? Are they just going to fizzle out, or are they just going to stick around for forever? So this week is Ghostbusters Frozen Empire is the big current one. We've got an Alien movie coming out later this year that from the trailer looks to be just a random arrangement of Alien stuff that you've seen in other Alien movies, for example. And there's no attempt to pitch a new story, a new idea, at least in the trailer. So that kind of prompted this idea. So do the two of you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I can kick off. I feel like probably one of the most important things that they need to consider or need to focus on before, thinking about doing another movie or, continuing the franchise is understanding who they want the audience to be. Because I feel like a lot of the times they sort of get lost in trying to capture everyone, by having sort of people that grew up with it, and doing a lot of like nostalgia baiting in it, whilst sometimes trying to make it younger with like a sort of fresh faces. You'll see it in sort of like Ghostbusters where you've got the old crew and the new crew, and they're trying to mash them up together. And at the end of the day, it's like who was the movie made for? You're trying to capture too many people in one. Whereas if I feel like if they try to focus on just one thing, whether it's, sticking with the people that first initially loved it and helping the franchise move forward by sort of kind of growing it up. So for like Ghostbusters, for example, kind of like, making it a little bit more mature for sort of, to reflect, the older fan base that they have at the moment, or just completely going with something completely brand new and stepping away from sort of what happened previously, step away from, all the nostalgia, try to recapture, everything that made people fall in love with it initially, and then again, try to tailor it for a modern audience, and just try to capture a whole new fan base within it. But I don't feel like you can do both, and I feel like that's where a lot of some of these franchises have gone wrong. Things like Jurassic World, again, where you're bringing back people from the past, you're bringing us new characters and stuff like that, and it just kind of all gets muddled up. And I feel like it really hurts the story as well, because I feel like things are crammed in there where they don't need to be, where a lot of your story is distracted by showing a character that we'd known before, or trying to show a thing that we'd seen before in the franchise. And the actual telling a good story within that universe is kind of lost in it. So that's my initial thought on it, is just having the focused audience.
Wow. Well, me personally, yes, I do believe a dying franchise can be resuscitated with the right procedure. See what I did there, guys? Yeah, like what I think what they should do is okay. So I think the method that they should approach it. So they shouldn't like off bat do a remake, for example. I think what they should do is kind of introduce us to a prequel, use that as a vehicle to introduce a new world, if that makes sense. So new characters, new threats, still part of the franchise, but it's just not a remake. So rather than going to present times, do prequel and do what's the other word used for the future?
Sequel.
Sequel. Yes. So yeah, so because I think with remakes, it's just like, because we already have we've already been left with a bad taste from the remake or the continuation of the same world of that, of that franchise. For example, so with Alien, no, sorry, two questions. With Alien, is it a remake or is it a continuation or is it a prequel? Is it a sequel?
Yeah. You mean the one coming out this year?
Yeah, because it does give off the first Alien vibes from their
I didn't even see a premise in the trailer. So
okay.
I know that there's aliens and I know that it's on a spaceship.
Yeah, but the aesthetics kind of gives off the first Alien vibes. Like when you watch it, you'll kind of get the first vibes from it. Well, Jurassic Park, I'm guessing the latest one was that a sequel.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So honestly, I think, like I said, just create a new world. But the way you should create a new world is you should build into creating a new world, and the best way to do that is by doing a prequel first. So have people like, for example, like Game of Thrones and obviously House of Dragons. Obviously, Game of Thrones finished a long time ago. They said, okay, how can we continue this? And what they're doing now is obviously they're doing a prequel of House of Dragons, which a majority of people really like. And then after that, I'm guessing it's going to be a sequel. What I assume is going to be a sequel. Maybe I'm lying. I thought, is it going to be a sequel, Daniel?
There's nothing been announced. There's been talk of a whole bunch of different spin-offs. Some of which are set after the main story, but none of them except for.
Yeah, because I remember we had a conversation. And I thought there was mentions of them being like a sequel. So
there's supposed to be a Jon Snow series, but that's been talked about for years and nothing's materialized.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's my thoughts. I do believe, start off by using a prequel as a vehicle to have us love the franchise again, and then that's when you follow that up with a sequel, but a sequel with a new world. Like pretty much a new world, like I said, new story, new characters, yeah. And try and make, and whoever is right, I understand making it universal when it comes to who you want the audience to be or make more money. I get that, but I think that's what's hurting the quality of the show because you're trying to, is because it requires censorship in a way, because obviously if you want all demographics as in age groups to be able to access this, be able to enjoy this specific franchise, then we all have different likes and different tastes, and we get that from different things, and a mature audience of course is gonna like differently from a younger audience and the likes. I do believe know what and who your audience is, and yeah, just pretty much start from scratch, but just use the prequel as a vehicle to do that. So we can, get that love for that franchise again.
That's kind of the irony of making movies for everybody, is that they end up all being the same. So if you don't like that particular thing, then there's nothing for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big paradox in that.
Not true. But they just want money, I'm saying. And sometimes, like for example, John Wick, what's the rating for that? The age?
I don't know.
Probably.
But it's certainly not a movie for everybody.
Exactly. And look how successful it's become. Of course, the first John Wick, then it was still successful, but it didn't make as much as the latest one. But you know what I'm saying? You can still build off movies that have that are aimed at a specific audience. You know what I'm saying? You don't need to make things universal. It doesn't have to be Avengers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can be your John Wick or even your Evil Dead, because Evil Dead was successful in the box office sales as well. So yeah.
I feel like kind of some of what you're touching on there as well is that in all of these different franchises, these are forever franchises for a reason, because people love specific elements about them. Whether it's Star Wars and the whole mythos of the Jedi and the Force and lightsabers and this, that, and the other, or whether it's, I don't know, just Jurassic World and this kind of like world with like dinosaurs and stuff like that. There's like a reason why these franchises have sort of been around for so long, and it's about taking kind of those elements, that people love about that, and then just using that to tell a new story essentially, and not having to recycle the same old thing over and over again, because then you're just tiring out your audiences. You're running the same gag, you're running the same thing over and over again, and of course people will get tired of it. Like Star Wars, for example. Star Wars is a vast universe, and Star Wars has spanned for hundreds and whatever years in kind of like the whole like storytelling thing. I'm sure if you get a competent writer, the competent director who has a specific vision, would be able to tell an amazing story within that universe, without necessarily having to like rehash a lot of things that have been done in the past.
So I think when you have a long-running franchise and you want to figure out what to do with it, I think you have two good options. There's lots of different options, but two good ones. One of them is you kind of figure out a formula and then you crank out things that match that formula, right? So like the first 15 or so James Bond movies kind of followed the same formula, but they didn't really advance an ongoing narrative, right? Like James Bond goes on a mission, he has adventures, he goes to exotic locations, and right? So there were certain pieces that go into telling a James Bond story, and they all kind of followed a similar pattern and template, but they were like different, like the details were different, and there were different stories within that template. And the other one is that you can take the story forward, right? So for example, the thing that's holding back Terminator, for example, is that everybody wants to recapture the magic of Terminator 1 and 2, which are the ones that everybody likes. But nobody's moving the story forward, right? It's still a Terminator comes back in time for the present day and tries to kill somebody, and somebody else, usually another Terminator, tries to stop them. That's pretty much every Terminator since, that describes like 5 out of 6 Terminator movies or something like that. Whereas the things that are actually good are the ones that advance the formula in some way. Terminator 2 built on Terminator 1. Terminator Salvation, even though it wasn't a terribly good movie, at least moved the story forward and showed us a different part of the Terminator universe. And I'm one of the 3 people that actually likes the TV show, because that they've had the time to delve into different aspects that you couldn't do in a movie format, for example. Whereas the bad ones are the ones that just try to do Terminator 1 again, right? Come with me if you want to live, big shootout in a factory, Sarah Connor and Kyle Reese and all of that, right? So similarly, Star Wars is terrified of moving forward in time. Like even the ones that technically move forward in the timeline are just recycling old ideas. It's still X-Wing versus TIE Fighters, Rebels versus Imperials, and so on. There's nothing. The universe has not moved on. It's the same pieces rearranged slightly. Star Trek, same way. Everything is either a prequel or a nostalgia fest for the thing that was great 25 years ago. But it's not moving forward. There have not been new stories, a new status quo, new events, new factions, new characters. So I think the reason these franchises are kind of stalling out is because they're not doing one of those two things.
Yeah.
Question. So why do you think the industry isn't enhancing the formula and creating something new? Because it's already dying. So I don't understand what they're so scared about.
So it's actually not dying. So today I looked at the box office of these movies.
Oh, okay, no, you're right.
And what's actually happening?
Like that.
Sorry, so just very quickly, I went in expecting the same thing that you just said, right? I thought, aren't these movies all losing money? Why do they keep doing this? Why isn't anybody thinking of anything new? But what actually happens is that usually, so these franchises tend to have 2 movies that do really well, like 10, 15 times. They make 10, 15 times their budget, for example, and then it falls off to the break-even point, to about 2.5 times their budget. And very few of them actually fall below that. And it's usually individual movies that make less than that. So they are actually breaking even at the box office. And so anything they make in merchandising and in streaming rights and so on is all profit. Right? So these are not money-losing franchises. Like between them, they've made quite a lot of money. And so I went in expecting, launching into the usual cliches about out-of-touch executives and stuff like that. But it's almost like a scientific model where they say, okay, this is what we have to do to make money. And they seem to be doing it. Like these movies are, like people are showing up to these movies. They are, for the most part, and these movies are usually somewhere around the break-even point in the box office, and then the profit comes afterwards. My big thing is just, isn't this just running on fumes from 30 years ago? Like, these things are all coasting on good ideas people had 30 or 40 years ago. And will this work forever? Like, if you have a 15-year-old today, is that person going to be in love with Jurassic Park, with Ghostbusters, with whatever, like even Star Wars? Isn't this already tired from that, old and tired from that? Isn't this like their grandparents' thing?
But it's all dependent on how well they recruit the younger audience, to be honest. Like, for example, Ghostbusters, and we're going to touch on that a little bit more when we actually do the actual Ghostbusters review. For the sake of this video, we've already done it and it came out on Thursday. But I mean, I was in the cinema and I thought it was a cool movie. But when it ended, like, no joke, there was a kid behind me that was jumping up and down, singing like he'd just seen the best movie he's ever seen in his life, pretty much. And that kind of speaks more towards what that movie's target audience was, in terms of my opinion on it, and compared to the kid. But it's all about how well they can recruit the younger audience to then be invested. Again, it's about the element of what people initially loved about the the movies. The kind of like the lightsabers and the Force and stuff like that. And it's like, if they can get new audiences to buy into it, while maybe giving them something a little bit new, like Grogu, for example, from the Mandalorian season, where everyone kind of like loved him. He's like this little cute Yoda and stuff like that. Then I can't see how they can't continue doing.
But does Grogu have staying power? Will people care about Grogu in 20 years?
If they put him on the big screen, baby.
Sure, yeah, they're currently they have a Grogu movie announced. Yes.
Yeah.
My thing is just, these stories were already old when we were growing up, right? Like, to me, Terminator and original Star Wars, that's all classic movies anyway, because they were made before I was born. And somebody who's 20 years younger, like he was in their teens now, like, can we count on them to discover those stories and fall in love with them, or is what's being put out today good enough? Because to me, it all feels like a kind of cynical rearrangement of parts to trigger people, like the nostalgia of 40-year-olds. But kind of 15, like you just had an example of like a 12-year-old or whatever that really got into Ghostbusters. But can we count on that at scale?
Probably not. Like, in my opinion, probably not. But again, this is small echo chamber. Like, in my opinion on these movies is that they've not been, good enough. But you see,
it's like that question of what character did anybody fall in love with in the Star Wars sequels, for example, right? People like I honestly don't know that they have that much staying power, right? Because and it's not just Star Wars, it's the other ones too. Like, can we expect these characters to be inspiring people 30 years from now, 40 years from now, the way Captain Picard did, and Luke Skywalker and Sarah Connor and so on?
I feel like the biggest test will be the next Star Wars movie, in terms of how people respond to it, because I think we've been maybe 4 or 5 years from the last Star Wars movie.
5. Mm-hmm.
It's been about 5 years from the last Star Wars movie. So in terms of like how people flop, we had that big gap between the prequels and when The Force Awakens came out, and you saw how people came out for that movie. Will people do the same for the next one? I feel like that would be very telling.
I don't feel like that's even one of their targets or goals. Like, because like you said, I think obviously they're trying to make everyone happy, right? With the whole, like, in term, they'll have bits where they rely heavily on nostalgia, but at the same time, the story won't, like, you can tell the story's made to appease a new younger audience, if that makes sense. Well, not a younger audience per se, depending on what we're talking about, but a new audience. So they're trying to kind of like make everyone happy, but it seems like it's more business. It seems like it's a business decision where they're relying more on the new audience rather than keeping the cult fans, people that have been riding with this franchise, happy. You know what I'm saying? Because the reason why I say that is because Daniel, what was that series? I think it was Star Wars series that you said was one of the best series, like one of the best pieces of Star Wars you've seen in a very long time.
That's probably Andor.
Yes, but no one, and then you said no one watched it, right?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Exactly. So I think stuff like that is like, so maybe to them is like, okay, you know what? We hear a bunch of people talking about how they want, they want Star Wars to be better. But then when they produce something that is better, like you just said, Andor series, one of the best series that you've seen, people are not watching it. So we can't really blame them, because it's just one of them ones where you can't keep everyone happy.
But what I feel in that case, and of course it's evidence that whenever you try to do something where you haven't got the most popular characters, it doesn't always do as well. But what they probably need to do better if they're trying to capture, everyone, is hand the baton over a lot better than what they're doing at the moment. Because, you can have, your historical characters like your Obi-Wans and stuff like that being introduced being continued in these TV series, in these movies. But at the same time, you have to give us new characters for the younger audiences to latch onto and to care about as well. So what characters did we have come back? I think did Lando come back in the Star Wars sequels, the later one? Days really.
So he was technically there, yes.
Yeah, and then you had like Princess Leia and stuff like that. So, the older fans would go, and obviously you had Han Solo as well. So the older fans went there, they saw Han Solo again, they saw Princess Leia again. But what Star Wars failed to do was pass the baton on to Daisy Ridley's character, or to John Boyega's character, Finn, and I can't remember what her name was. They failed to do that. So there isn't anything inherently wrong with trying to capture everyone, even though I do feel like they probably should have a little bit more of a focus. But if they're going to try and capture everyone, they just need to hand the baton over a lot better than what they're doing at the moment.
In my view, something like Star Wars shouldn't be for everybody. It should be for everybody who likes Star Wars, and that's not the same thing.
Yeah. But more so what I'm saying is that obviously people that do like Star Wars will go to see Star Wars, but in terms of like you said, people don't love the new characters, like they love Luke Skywalker and things like that. So like a younger fan that's maybe watched Star Wars with their parents, and their parents have introduced them to Star Wars, then goes to the movie and doesn't have a new favorite character to connect with. They're loving the same characters that their parents loved, as opposed to I'm a Star Wars fan and I really like Finn because he's really cool and he was like amazing in the sequel series.
Yeah, that's kind of where I think these franchises are kind of living on borrowed time. Where I like the idea of Finn, for example, but he doesn't do anything in the movies that's really all that memorable or impressive or captivating, because he doesn't do anything, right? Mm-hmm. And that isn't the actor's fault, and that's not the character's that's not a problem with the character concept. If anything, the execution didn't live up to the concept. I really would have loved to see a Stormtrooper rebellion led by Finn, right? For example, that would have been a really cool story. But for whatever reason, they decided to not do that. But they have not been specifically in Star Wars, they have not been generating new iconic characters and moments, I thought. Everything is kind of a callback to what we already know, but the problem is that only works on people who, years and decades ago, fell in love with the originals. And you can't count on a 15-year-old to care about that.
Mm. Are there any examples of where it's been done well? And I'm trying to think about it, of like new iconic characters from some of these franchises.
The big franchises.
That's putting us on the spot, but I'm trying to have a think about it.
They all kind of seem treading water, right?
Yeah.
Jurassic Park seems to be moving forward. I'll be honest, I watched the new ones once and it did not very much stuck, but I think they are moving forward a little bit in terms of its premise. But yeah, it's like it seems to be the new characters are either imitations of the old characters, or then they don't have very much staying power. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a reason why they keep bringing back these 80-year-olds. Like the last season of Picard was literally 70 and 80-year-olds trying to pull in their gut and trying to look like they did in the early 90s. Mm. It's not, there hasn't been a new roster. Like, I don't think any of the really big franchises have succeeded in passing the baton to the next generation. Some of them have tried, and I don't think any have succeeded, at least none that I can think of right now. Yeah. Like Star Trek did it in the late 80s, early 90s, right, with the next generation. So it can be done, absolutely. And Star Wars kind of did it with the prequels, in the sense that it introduced a new set of characters that people eventually came to like, or not, but that had to do with other factors. But the point is, the franchise moved forward at that point and added something new, and sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I think where they're all failing is like Alien. Everybody seems to be a Ripley clone, like sometimes literally, but often just in terms of theme and character and fear. Terminator, kind of same thing. It's always Sarah Connor, it's always John Connor, it's always a CGI Schwarzenegger.
Yeah.
Like I think one of the really big things that's preventing these franchises from moving forward is both that they don't move forward chronologically, and also they fail to pass the baton to the next generation.
Question, because I know you've seen the original Planet of the Apes, and that's like, I've watched the later ones that have come out in sort of recent years and have absolutely loved it. But do you feel like were they kind of the same characters redone? Was it like a remake, or was it? I don't think it was a continuation, but they kind of retold the story, I believe. And is that
the original series and then the current series?
Yeah, is that like a retelling, or is it like
they're largely different? They're not the same stories at all.
Stories, okay, because like that's like that's a sleeping giant of a franchise completely. And I know like people really loved Caesar as a character and stuff like that.
So now that you mentioned, Caesar appears in both.
Yeah.
But it's a very different story, like in terms of how it unfolds and how it's told and so on. So it's not simply, you don't. I don't think you go to see Planet of the Apes for the CGI Caesar, because number one, Caesar already wasn't that iconic in this. Like he's no Captain Picard, he's no Captain Kirk, he's no Luke Skywalker, right? He's just a character from the previous movies. And also, I think Planet of the Apes is something you see for the concept and for the story, not for specific characters. Yeah. I don't think the characters were ever a strength of that franchise.
That's another question, actually, because again, Planet of the Apes is one that does really well. Yeah. Is it better for these franchises to actually not have iconic characters and just be good movies? Because Planet of the Apes, again, is a $1 billion franchise that's been kind of ticking along really well. Obviously, they've got the new one coming up where they're advancing the story, and I think they're moving forward a lot in the future and stuff like that. But again, it probably doesn't have the iconic character that people love and people are dying to see. So like, if we get a new Planet of the Apes where Caesar's not involved, I don't think people will be as upset and will be sort of willing to accept the new story that's being told.
Yeah, go ahead, Jonathan.
So I was going to say, I think you can do both, though. I just feel like the story shouldn't be centered around that iconic character, as in like it should revolve around the new characters, and maybe you could just put his input as just a piece of nostalgia. Now I know it seems like we're against the whole. Well, I don't think we're against the whole nostalgia notion, but when you make nostalgia the whole chunk of the film, like when you're just relying on nostalgia, then there's a big issue with it. But having an iconic character in the new world, the new world in the new world.
I think the problem with a lot of these franchises is that they have iconic imagery, but nobody can think of a new story to tell, right? We like, people cheer at the lightsabers and the X-Wings and the TIE fighters, but there isn't really, like, people aren't really showing up for the next chapter in the story. In large parts because one hasn't been presented. Right, but ultimately the audience, wants to see the familiar things. Like in the Alien trailer, there's facehuggers, and then there's the 70s sci-fi aesthetic, and there's the cryopods, and like, it's just elements that make you go, oh, I recognize that looks like real, like proper Alien. But there's zero attempt of saying, hey, go on, like, we have this great story to tell, and let us take you on a journey with us. Almost no trailers do that today anyway. But in the Alien trailer, I found it really striking at how zero emphasis there was on story. And I don't think very many people showing up for an Alien movie are there for, like, because they want to see what happens next. They want to have the Alien experience, and they want to have something that feels like Alien and Alien 2. Which is no jab at Alien fans. I'm one of them too. It feels like kind of just it's circling, and I feel like in all of these cases I think these worlds are so compelling because they have more potential. Like, it's really easy to come up with just a story to tell, like, maybe not the best story, but a story to tell that moves the franchise forward. And whenever they try, it's kind of a coin flip whether it works or not. But I think you have to do it, otherwise it kind of becomes stagnant.
Yeah. Whoa.
Like, I mean, similar to like Star Wars, for example, they can literally have something similar to what Shogun has, where the rebellion have finally defeated the what's the opposite side called? The Empire.
Yep.
The rebellion defeat the Empire. What then fills that void? There's like a vacuum of power, and then there's always going to be people jostling for that position to kind of be in charge, and then that's an interesting story to tell in the Star Wars universe.
Yep.
You have like kind of like some of the bones right there, and then you can then add the Star Wars magic to it to make people fall in love with it again. So, yeah.
Guys, it looks like.
So we're not going to solve this today.
Yeah, pretty much.
What I think we kind of are on the same page about is that these things used to have magic, and eventually it's going to run out, but it hasn't yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but I think it's like, do we agree that at some point it has to? Like in like 10 years from now, will they make Star Wars movies and Alien movies and Terminator movies, and they will still be the same thing, or will people eventually stop going?
I mean, eventually they'll run out of nostalgia, because the people that cared about it in the 80s and the 90s will eventually die. Will eventually die off. So the ones that will survive will be the ones that have been able to capture the minds of newer audiences, and that the ones that can't will die off. There's like there's been examples of like really big companies that people thought could never ever go bust, end up being a fragment of the imagination now. So
yeah,
nothing.
We're already kind of halfway there, where like just last week a new Star Wars series was announced, and it's got something like 500,000 downvotes, the trailer.
Yeah.
And like very few people are like people for a few years now have been saying, I never thought I would get tired of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Right. This used to be something once a decade, once every 2 decades event, and now it's noise almost. And
again, the other thing is they have no plan. Well, for the most part, it doesn't seem like there's a real plan or thought behind what's going on with the franchise and how to continue it. I've and again, with a lot of these franchises, it would have started off with one person's imagination. So for Star Wars, it's George Lucas. For Jurassic World, I don't know who created Jurassic World. I don't know who created. I think it was like who created Terminator.
Spielberg created Jurassic World. Jurassic Park.
Who? Sorry.
Spielberg, yeah. Michael Crichton wrote the novel, and it was the movies are by Spielberg.
Based on that, yeah. So like essentially, like there was like someone there that had the idea and wanted to bring this sort of kind of magic to life, and I feel like part of it would be best served in investing in someone similar to what Dune have done, where they've invested in Denis Villeneuve to sort of bring the Dune story to life. And I feel like if they found a filmmaker that they believed in, to be talented, they found a writer that they could pair them up with, that they thought was equally talented, and then just said, here's the franchise, bring us forward, do something to capture the hearts of the people again. I feel like that would probably serve them best, as opposed to just thinking about how to churn out the next movie for the next cash grab.
But at the same time, that could make or break someone's career. So
it could. I mean, it's big pressure, but time's ticking on these franchises. Time's almost running out. People are not as invested. People actively want to hate Star Wars now, which wasn't the case. People actively want to go and find something they don't like about Star Wars and complain and moan about it. Like you want people to love your franchises, and people just aren't doing that with some of them at the moment. So you got to roll the dice, and you got to try it. You have to try something.
No, I agree. Well, there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's topic. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Have
Yeah, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And of course, if you're a Star Wars fan and we spoke about Star Wars, don't forget to downvote us, because that's what you do with all Star Wars media. Thank you very much.
All right, guys. We will catch you next week. Well, next week or the week? Is it next week? Right, next week? Ooh.
It's every Monday. So next week, Monday.
Cool. But what's our movie review? Ghostbusters. Yes, guys. Be on the lookout for Ghostbusters.
That came out last Thursday.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys.
Gone for 1 week and you lost your mind.
Yeah, bro. Recovery can have a toll on you, man. Well, guys, see you next week. Over.
Ciao.
Bye bye.